Sarah moved through her day like a ghost, a blur of motion in a town that felt forgotten. Every morning, the same tired sun would peek over the cracked asphalt of their street, casting long, thin shadows that mirrored her own stretched thin patience. She was a single mother in a small American town, one that had seen better days and probably wouldn't see them again anytime soon. Her life was a constant loop of low-wage jobs, cleaning offices before dawn, slinging fries at lunch, then scrubbing floors at the local diner until her back screamed. The fear was a constant dull ache in her stomach, the fear of not having enough, of not being able to protect her son, Leo. It was a fear that sometimes tasted like copper in her mouth. Leo was her world. He was a bright, skinny kid with eyes that lit up whenever professional wrestling was on TV. For him, it wasn't just a show. It was a universe of heroes and villains, of good triumphing over evil. He'd sit glued to the screen, mimicking the moves, cheering so loud Sarah sometimes worried he'd wake the neighbors. Wrestling was his escape, his joy, and for Sarah it was a precious thing she fought tooth and nail to protect. But Leo also had a fragile health condition, one that flared up easily, especially in the colder months. It meant regular doctor visits, and more importantly, expensive medication. His love for wrestling was a rare source of pure happiness for him, and seeing that joy was often the only thing that kept Sarah going when she felt like giving up. It was her motivation, a tiny, glowing ember in the dark, cold corners of her life. The financial pressure was a suffocating blanket that seemed to get heavier with each passing week. The rent was overdue, not by a few days, but by weeks. There were stark, red notices from the electric company, threatening to cut them off. The pantry shelves were looking more and more empty, a sad collection of canned goods and half-eaten cereal boxes. Even her old, beat-up car, a relic she'd somehow kept running for years, was making strange, grinding noises. It was her only way to get to work, her lifeline to those multiple jobs that barely kept their heads above water. If the car gave out, everything else would follow. She'd tried everything, extra shifts, selling a few old things, even asking for an advance. But the answer was always no. The town was struggling, and everyone else was just trying to survive too. That day, the weight of it all felt heavier than usual. In her pocket, crumpled and worn, was her last $10 bill. It felt less like money and more like a ticking bomb. $10. It was nothing, and yet it was everything. It was a decision, stark and brutal. Did she use it for Leo's medication, which was running low? Did she put a gallon or two of gas in the car, hoping it would last just a little longer? Or did she buy some food, something hot and filling to stave off the gnawing hunger for another day? Each choice felt like a betrayal of the others. It was her final lifeline, and she felt it slipping through her fingers. She was walking home after her last shift, the diner closing down for the night, the smell of grease and stale coffee clinging to her clothes. Her feet ached, and a dull headache throbbed behind her eyes. As she passed the back alley of the diner, a shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness. It was a man, large and imposing, slumped against the brick wall. He looked rough, his clothes torn, his hair a mess. He was visibly distressed, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow with hunger. He looked utterly defeated. Despite her own desperate situation, a flicker of something sparked inside Sarah. Empathy, a feeling she thought she'd buried under layers of stress and worry. Her internal conflict was immediate and sharp. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to keep walking. That $10. It was for Leo. It was for them. Her survival depended on it. But looking at the man, she saw a reflection of her own past, moments when she'd felt that same profound hunger, that same crushing despair. She remembered what it felt like to be invisible, to be a burden, to have no one. Her mind raced, a furious debate between logic and a powerful, almost primal urge to help. The man's hunger was so raw, so evident. It resonated with a deep, forgotten part of her. With a heavy heart, but a sudden, unshakable resolve, Sarah made her decision. The $10. It wouldn't solve all their problems, not even close. But it could solve his problem right now. She took a deep breath, the cold night air filling her lungs. She would spend her last $10 on a meal for the stranger. It was a crazy thing to do, she knew. It went against every practical bone in her body. But sometimes, when you're at the very bottom, when there's no rational solution left, all you have is a desperate hope for a miracle. And maybe, just maybe, an act of kindness could be the first step towards one. She turned and walked back towards the diner door she had just locked, her hand tightening around the crumpled bill in her pocket. Sarah pushed open the diner door, the bell above jingling softly, announcing her return. The night manager, a tired-looking woman named Brenda, looked up, surprised to see her. Sarah just gave a small, apologetic smile and quickly ordered a hearty meal, a double cheeseburger, extra fries, and a large soda. It was more food than she'd eaten in days herself. Brenda, used to Sarah's usual order of black coffee, raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. Sarah paid with her last $10 bill, the last trace of the crumpled paper disappearing into the register. A strange mix of fear and relief washed over her. It was done. She carried the overflowing takeout bag back to the alley. The man was still there, his head now bowed, seemingly lost in thought or despair. Sarah approached him slowly, not wanting to startle him. "Hey," she said softly, holding out the bag. "I got you something to eat." The man looked up, his eyes widening slightly. He seemed hesitant, as if expecting a trick. His gaze flickered from her face to the bag, then back again. He was huge, even sitting down, with broad shoulders and thick arms that hinted at immense strength, now hidden beneath layers of worn fabric. He slowly reached out, his large hand trembling slightly as he took the bag. "Thank you," he mumbled, his voice raspy, as if unused. He opened the bag, and the aroma of hot food filled the cool night air. He didn't immediately devour it, but looked at it with a kind of reverence, like it was the most precious thing he had ever seen. Sarah sat down a little distance from him, leaning against the cold brick wall. She didn't want to pry, but she felt a pull to stay, to make sure he ate. "It's good," she offered, trying to sound reassuring. "Fresh off the grill." He nodded, taking a bite of the burger. His eyes closed briefly, as if savoring the simple taste. "I haven't eaten in 2 days," he said, his voice a little stronger now. "My name's Rex." Sarah introduced herself. "I'm Sarah." She didn't press him for details, just listened as he slowly ate, occasionally offering a small piece of his story in between bites. He was a professional wrestler, or at least he used to be. "They called me the Titan," he said, a faint, almost sad smile touching his lips. He'd gotten injured, a bad knee, and things went downhill from there. Lost his savings, his place. He was supposed to have a tryout in a city a few hundred miles away, a last chance, but his car broke down a couple of towns back. He'd been hitchhiking, trying to make it, but no one wanted to pick up a guy his size, especially one who looked as rough as he did. He'd been stranded here for days, out of money, out of hope. Sarah listened without judgment. She understood what it felt like to be at rock bottom, to have your dreams crumble around you. She didn't tell him about her own struggles, about the eviction notice or Leo's dwindling medication. This wasn't about her. It was about him in this moment. She just offered words of quiet encouragement. "Sometimes things just get really hard," she said, her voice soft. "But you can always find a way back. You just gotta keep trying." Rex looked at her, his expression unreadable for a moment. He was a mountain of a man, but in his eyes, Sarah saw a vulnerability that matched her own. He finished the burger and fries, then slowly drank the soda. He seemed to shrink a little, the tension easing from his massive frame. The food had brought him back to himself, even if just a little. "You didn't have to do that," he said, his voice low. "You don't even know me." "It doesn't matter," Sarah replied, shrugging slightly. "Everyone deserves a meal. Everyone deserves a chance." She meant it. She truly believed that, even when life tried its hardest to beat it out of her. A brief, unspoken connection formed between them in the quiet alley. Rex, despite his intimidating size, seemed humbled, almost embarrassed by her simple act of kindness. He looked down at his empty bag, then back at Sarah, a flicker of something new in his eyes. Not just gratitude, but a stirring of hope. Her small act, from someone who clearly had so little herself, seemed to have profoundly impacted him. It was as if her selflessness had chipped away at the hardened shell he'd built around himself, reminding him that goodness still existed in the world. As the night grew colder, Sarah knew she had to get home to Leo. She stood up, brushing dust from her jeans. "Well," she said, "I should go. My son's waiting." Rex stood up too, towering over her. He extended his hand, and Sarah, a little cautiously, shook it. His grip was surprisingly gentle. "Sarah," he said, his voice earnest, "I won't forget this, I promise. If I ever get back on my feet, I'll find a way to repay you." Sarah just smiled. "Don't worry about it, Rex. Just get to your tryout. Get back to being the Titan." She didn't really expect anything. She just hoped he could make it. Hoped he could find his way out of the darkness she knew so well. She turned and started her walk home, the cold seeping into her bones. The alley grew dark behind her, and Rex became just a shadow once more. Her wallet was empty, her last $10 gone. The decision weighed on her, the immediate challenge of providing for Leo looming large. But despite the fear, a quiet sense of peace settled in her heart. She had helped someone. In a world that often felt harsh and unforgiving, she had chosen kindness. It was a small victory, a tiny spark in the vast darkness, and for a moment, it was enough. She still didn't know how she would face tomorrow, but for tonight, she had done a good thing. The morning light, usually a symbol of new beginnings, felt like a harsh spotlight on Sarah's grim reality. She woke up with a start, the memory of her empty wallet hitting her like a physical blow. The small amount of peace she'd felt the night before, born of her act of kindness, had dissolved into a cold dread. Leo was still asleep, his breathing a little ragged. Today, he was due for his medication, the one that kept his fragile health stable. And Sarah had no money, not a single cent. She tiptoed to the kitchen, a familiar knot tightening in her stomach. The cupboards were bare, save for a few packets of instant oatmeal. Not enough for a growing boy, especially one who needed good nutrition to fight off his illness. On the worn kitchen table, a crisp white envelope stood out against the faded wood. The landlord's handwriting was unmistakable. A final eviction notice. The date on it was just 3 days away. Her heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs. This wasn't just a warning anymore. It was a deadline, a countdown to homelessness. Leo coughed in his sleep, a dry, hacking sound that sent a jolt of panic through Sarah. She rushed to his bedside, gently placing a hand on his forehead. He felt warm, too warm. His cheeks were flushed, and his breathing was shallower than usual. He opened his eyes, glassy and tired. "Mommy?" he whispered, his voice raspy. "My throat hurts." Sarah forced a smile, though her own throat felt tight with unshed tears. "It's okay, sweetie. Just a little cold. We'll get you some medicine." The lie tasted bitter in her mouth. She had no medicine. No money for medicine. The guilt gnawed at her, a sharp, relentless pain. Had she made the wrong choice last night? Should she have kept the $10 for Leo? But then she remembered Rex's desperate eyes, his hunger. It was a choice between two agonies, and she had chosen one she could live with, even if it meant more suffering for herself and Leo. She spent the morning making desperate calls. She tried her old boss at the diner, asking if there were any extra shifts, any cleaning jobs, anything at all. "Sorry, Sarah," he'd said, his voice flat. "Business is slow. Can't even keep the staff I got." She called the grocery store, where she sometimes stocked shelves. The answer was the same. The town's economy was a ghost town, jobs scarcer than ever. Every door slammed shut in her face, each rejection chipping away at her already fragile hope. Determined not to give up, she decided to drive to the next town over, where there was a larger factory that sometimes hired temporary workers. She needed cash today. She bundled Leo in a thick blanket, despite the rising temperature of his fever, and helped him into the passenger seat of her beat-up sedan. As she turned the key, the engine sputtered weakly, coughed once, and then died. She tried again and again. Nothing. The car, her last lifeline to work, to a semblance of normalcy, had finally given out. It sat there, a rusted monument to her mounting failures. Sarah leaned her head against the steering wheel, hot tears finally spilling down her face. The weight of it all, the relentless pressure, the despair, crushed her. She felt like a failure, a terrible mother who couldn't even keep her child healthy, who couldn't keep a roof over their heads. She looked at Leo, whose innocent eyes watched her with a mixture of confusion and trust. He was still clutching his worn-out wrestling action figure, a small plastic hero with chipped paint. That action figure, and Leo's unwavering love for wrestling, was his escape, his little world of strength and triumph. "Mommy, are we going to see the wrestlers?" Leo asked, his voice weak. He still held on to that dream, that innocent belief that everything would be okay, that heroes always won in the end. He talked about his favorite wrestlers, how strong they were, how they never gave up. He didn't understand about eviction notices, or empty wallets, or broken cars. He just knew he loved wrestling, and he loved his mom. His pure, untainted hope was a double-edged sword. It kept a tiny spark alive in Sarah's own heart, a flicker that refused to be extinguished completely. But it also amplified her anguish, making her feel even more acutely her inability to protect him, to give him the life he deserved. How could she tell him they might soon be sleeping in the car, if the car even started again? How could she explain that his heroes, the strong, invincible men he admired, couldn't save them from this? The deadline for eviction loomed like a dark cloud over their small apartment. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow on the wall seemed to whisper, "Homeless." Sarah began to mentally prepare for the worst. Where would they go? What would they eat? The questions spiraled in her mind, each one more terrifying than the last. She held Leo close, inhaling the sweet, faint smell of him, trying to memorize the feeling of his small body against hers. This might be all they had left soon. Just each other. And a crumbling dream. A few days later, a strange rumor started making its way through the small, struggling town. It wasn't the kind of news that spread like wildfire, more like a quiet whisper carried on the wind, picked up by those who had nothing else to talk about. People were saying there was going to be a professional wrestling event, not in the big city an hour away, but right here in their little corner of nowhere. Most folks just shrugged it off. It sounded too good to be true, like something someone made up to pass the time. A wrestling show here? Impossible. It was probably just some local guys putting on a small amateur match, nothing worth paying attention to. The town had enough problems without getting excited over something that would surely be a letdown. But Leo, with his ears always perked for anything wrestling-related, heard the whispers. His eyes, usually a bit dull from his sickness, lit up with an intensity that surprised Sarah. He started talking about it constantly, asking if they could go. "Mommy, they said wrestlers are coming. Real ones. Can we go? Please, Mommy, please." He'd bounce on the worn-out couch, a small burst of energy that would quickly fade, leaving him breathless. Sarah would just smile weakly, her heart aching. She'd try to explain gently that they couldn't, that they didn't have money for things like that, but Leo barely heard her. His imagination was already running wild with visions of his heroes in the ring. He'd talk about the moves, the costumes, the way they celebrated after a win. For him, the wrestling event was a beacon, a bright spot in their otherwise gray existence. Sarah, however, couldn't bring herself to share his enthusiasm. To her, the idea of a wrestling event was just another cruel reminder of everything they lacked. It was an impossible dream, a luxury they couldn't afford, a distraction from the very real, very pressing problems of eviction, empty cupboards, and Leo's worsening cough. She saw it as a cruel joke, a splash of color in a world that was rapidly turning black and white. How could she think about entertainment when she couldn't even guarantee her son his next meal or his next dose of medicine? Her mind was a constant loop of survival strategies, each one failing before it even fully formed. The wrestling event was just noise, a faraway sound that didn't matter. She was too focused on keeping their heads above water to even consider looking up at the sky. What Sarah didn't know, couldn't possibly know, was that the Titan Rex had indeed had a successful tryout. The few dollars she had given him, the simple act of kindness, had been like a shot of adrenaline. It had cleared his head, given him the strength to perform, and reminded him that there was still good in the world, even for someone as down and out as he was. He walked into that tryout with a fire in his belly, a determination that had been missing for years. His performance impressed the organizers, not just because of his raw power, but because of the renewed spirit he carried. They saw potential, a story. They saw a wrestler with heart, and they offered him a spot on their upcoming tour, which included a stop in Sarah's small town. Rex, now with a steady job and a bit of money in his pocket, hadn't forgotten Sarah, not for a second. Her face, her quiet strength, the way she had looked at him with genuine concern despite her own obvious struggles, was burned into his memory. He felt a deep, almost overwhelming obligation to repay her, not just for the $10, but for the hope she had unknowingly given him. He knew she had sacrificed her last resources for him, a stranger. That kind of selflessness was rare, and it demanded more than just a simple thank you. He thought about her often, about her tired eyes, and the little boy she was clearly struggling to protect. He knew he had to do something big. As he traveled with the wrestling promotion, talking to the other wrestlers, the organizers, and the behind-the-scenes crew, Rex subtly began to plant the seeds for a plan. He'd start by telling his story, not just about his tryout, but about the days leading up to it, about being stranded and hungry. Then he'd talk about Sarah, about her selfless act. He'd describe her kindness, her quiet dignity, and the clear signs of hardship she carried. He wouldn't make it about pity, but about respect, about how one small act of human decency had pulled him back from the brink. He'd emphasize her dire situation, painting a picture of a good person caught in a bad situation, someone who deserved a break. The wrestling community, a strange mix of larger-than-life characters and surprisingly down-to-earth people, listened. They were a close-knit bunch, often traveling together, sharing stories of their own struggles, their injuries, their time on the road. They understood hardship. Many of them had faced similar moments of desperation, times when they questioned everything. Rex's story resonated deeply. They were often portrayed as heroes in the ring, larger-than-life figures who overcame obstacles. Here was a chance to be a hero outside the ring, to do something truly meaningful. Sarah's compassion, her willingness to give when she had nothing, inspired them. It reminded them of the best parts of humanity, the parts they sometimes forgot in the cutthroat world of professional sports. They started thinking not just about helping Rex, but about helping Sarah. The idea began to take root, nurtured by Rex's quiet insistence and the collective goodwill of the wrestling family. They were ready to do something. The wrestling event, which had started as a vague rumor, was now officially confirmed. Flyers, bright and colorful, began to appear in storefront windows and on community bulletin boards all over town. It wasn't just a small local show anymore. It was a significant charity event, organized by a larger, well-known promotion. The buzz was growing, and people were actually talking about it. A rare burst of excitement in a town that usually had little to celebrate. Behind the scenes, Rex, the Titan, was working tirelessly. He spent hours talking to the event organizers, the promotion's management, and any wrestler who would listen. He explained Sarah's plight in detail, making sure everyone understood the gravity of her situation. He told his story over and over, recounting how her single act of kindness, her last $10, had saved him from utter despair. He described her quiet strength, her struggle, and the clear love she had for her son, Leo. He made it clear that this wasn't just about a handout. It was about honoring a good person who had given everything she had to help a stranger. His words struck a chord. The wrestlers, a group known for their camaraderie despite their onstage rivalries, were deeply moved. They understood the grind, the loneliness of the road, the times when they themselves had been down on their luck. They saw themselves in Rex's story, and they saw the best of humanity in Sarah's actions. The idea of helping her, of using their collective power for good, quickly took hold. It became more than just a suggestion. It became a mission. They decided, as a group, to pool their resources and use their platform to help Sarah and Leo. They saw it as an opportunity to give back, to embody the heroic personas they portrayed in the ring, but in a real-world, tangible way. A secret plan began to form. A detailed operation hatched among Rex, the event organizers, and about 50 other wrestlers. They wanted to do more than just give her money. They wanted to provide a fresh start, a complete turnaround for Sarah and Leo. This wasn't going to be a simple donation. It was going to be an intervention, a complete surprise that would change their lives forever. They worked out logistics, coordinating schedules and resources, all under the radar. They wanted the full impact of their generosity to hit Sarah at once, to show her the true power of kindness returned. Meanwhile, Sarah remained completely unaware of the growing movement to help her. Her world was still small, confined to the immediate threats of eviction and Leo's health. She barely noticed the new flyers for the wrestling event, her mind consumed by the daily struggle. The landlord's final notice hung over her like a dark cloud, and the fear of not being able to provide for Leo gnawed at her constantly. She was too busy trying to survive to even consider the possibility of a miracle. Leo, on the other hand, was full of it. He continued to talk about the wrestling event, his excitement palpable. He'd seen the new, bigger flyers and heard the whispers at school. He hoped his favorite wrestlers would be there, especially the Titan Rex, the one who had looked so strong and kind. He'd draw pictures of wrestlers in action, imagining them flying through the air, winning championships. His innocent belief in heroes and happy endings unknowingly fueled the very plan that was now rapidly coming together to change their lives. His unwavering optimism, despite their circumstances, was a small, flickering light in Sarah's otherwise dark world. The day before the event arrived, and it found Sarah at her absolute lowest point. The eviction notice was final. They had to be out by the end of the week. She had exhausted every option, every contact, every last shred of hope. Her car was still broken, her bank account empty, and Leo's cough, while not as bad as before, still worried her. She sat on the worn couch, staring at the peeling wallpaper, the weight of her failures crushing her. She looked at Leo, asleep in his small bed, his wrestling figures scattered around him, and imagined their future without a home, without stability. The thought of telling him they had nowhere to go, that she had failed him completely, was almost unbearable. She felt a profound sense of helplessness, a despair so deep it felt physical. She closed her eyes, wishing for an answer, a sign, anything to pull them from the edge of the abyss. But no answer came, only the silence of their impending doom. She had given her last to a stranger, and now she had nothing left for her son. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. She had done the right thing, but it had cost her everything, or so she thought. The morning after Sarah's deepest despair, a sharp knock rattled her apartment door. It wasn't the tentative rap of a neighbor or the insistent buzz of a bill collector. This was a firm, almost booming sound, one that made the cheap wood vibrate. Sarah's heart jumped. She expected the landlord, probably with the sheriff this time, ready to enforce the eviction notice. Her stomach clenched with dread. Taking a shaky breath, she smoothed her hair, trying to appear composed, despite the fear that chilled her to the bone. Every fiber of her being wanted to hide, to pretend they weren't home. But she knew that would only delay the inevitable. With a heavy sigh, she slowly pulled the door open, just a crack. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Standing on her porch, filling the small entryway, was Rex. The Titan. Rex. But he wasn't disheveled or hungry anymore. He was clean-shaven, his dark hair neatly cut, and he wore a crisp, tailored suit that looked expensive. He stood tall, a friendly but serious expression on his face. Behind him, the small porch was crowded with other men, all of them large and well-built, some with arms crossed, others with hands on their hips. They were clearly professional wrestlers, even in their street clothes. Their presence was overwhelming, almost intimidating. Sarah recognized a few faces from Leo's wrestling magazines, and her confusion deepened. Why were they here? Was this some kind of joke? Or worse, A mistake. She felt a wave of dizziness, her mind struggling to process the scene before her. She gripped the doorframe, her knuckles white. "Rex?" she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. She couldn't form a full sentence. Her mind raced through every possible negative scenario. Had she done something wrong? Was she in trouble? The only thing she could think of was her last $10, the meal she'd bought him. Had he come back for more? She instinctively took a step back, pulling the door in slightly, ready to close it if needed. Fear mixed with a strange sense of bewilderment. Rex stepped forward, his expression softening as he saw her fear. "Sarah," he said, his deep voice rumbling, "please don't be scared. We're not here to cause trouble. We're here because of you." He paused, looking at the silent, imposing figures behind him. "Because of your kindness." He then took a deeper breath, his voice filled with an emotion Sarah couldn't quite place. Gratitude, reverence, a hint of awe. "When you bought me that meal, you saved me. You gave me hope when I had none. You showed me what real strength looks like." He looked directly into her eyes, and Sarah felt a strange warmth spread through her chest, pushing back against the cold fear. "The wrestling community, we're like a family, and families look out for each other. When I told them what you did, how you sacrificed everything for a stranger, they wanted to help. Then came the incredible news. One of the wrestlers, a man with a gentle face despite his massive build, stepped forward. He held a large, thick envelope. He extended it to Sarah. "This is from all of us, Sarah," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "It's a new start for you and Leo." Sarah took the envelope, her fingers trembling. It felt heavy, substantial. She opened it slowly, her eyes scanning the contents. Her breath hitched. Inside were several crisp, official-looking documents. A deed. A deed to a house. Not just any house, but a small, newly renovated home in a quiet part of town. There were also receipts indicating that the utilities were paid for months in advance, and a bank statement showing a substantial sum of money deposited into a new account. An account opened in her name, specifically for Leo's medical expenses and their future. The numbers blurred before her eyes. It was too much. It was impossible. Tears sprang to her eyes, blurring her vision completely. She wasn't crying from sadness, but from a shock so profound it felt like an electric current. The sheer magnitude of the gesture, the unexpected outpouring of generosity, was almost too much to comprehend. Her knees felt weak. She leaned against the doorframe, a choked sob escaping her lips. This wasn't just a handout. It was a lifeline, a miracle she hadn't dared to dream of. All the stress, the fear, the exhaustion of the past months, years even, came crashing down, releasing a torrent of emotion she couldn't control. I don't understand," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "Why?" Rex knelt slightly, bringing his eyes closer to hers. "Because you showed us what it means to be a hero, Sarah. Not in a ring, but in real life. You gave your last to someone who had nothing, expecting nothing in return. That kind of kindness, it deserves to be rewarded." Just then, a small, sleepy voice drifted from inside the apartment. "Mom, what's all the noise?" Leo, rubbing his eyes, padded out into the living room. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw the crowd of towering men on the porch. His eyes, still bleary from sleep, widened instantly. He recognized Rex, and then others. His favorite wrestlers, right there in their apartment. His jaw dropped. He looked from the wrestlers to his crying mother, his small face a mixture of joy and confusion. He was too young to fully grasp the gravity of the situation, the immense shift that had just occurred in their lives. He just saw his heroes, in person. "Rex!" Leo shrieked, his earlier sleepiness completely gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated excitement. He pointed a small finger at the Titan, then at the other wrestlers. "Mom, it's them! It's all of them!" His innocent joy, his pure, unburdened happiness, was the final push Sarah needed. She pulled him close, holding him tight, tears still flowing freely. This wasn't just for her. It was for him. It was for Leo. And in that moment, Sarah knew their lives would never be the same. The abyss had receded, replaced by an unimaginable, glorious dawn. The wrestlers, now an eager and supportive entourage, led Sarah and Leo away from the old, cramped apartment. Rex, with a gentle hand on Leo's shoulder, guided them towards a small, quiet street just a few blocks away. The walk felt surreal for Sarah, like she was moving through a dream. Every step away from her old life felt lighter, freer. When they arrived, a charming, freshly painted house stood before them. It wasn't huge, but it looked sturdy and welcoming, with a small patch of green lawn. The front door was a cheerful blue. As they stepped inside, Sarah gasped. The house was clean, filled with a soft, new carpet smell, and tastefully furnished with simple, comfortable pieces. There was a bright living room, a functional kitchen, and 2 cozy bedrooms. It was everything she had ever dreamed of, and more. Leo, however, didn't head for the living room or the kitchen. He bolted straight for the smaller of the 2 bedrooms. His eyes, wide with wonder, immediately landed on a corner where a brand-new miniature wrestling ring playset sat, complete with tiny action figures of his favorite wrestlers. His shriek of delight echoed through the house, a sound Sarah hadn't heard in years, not with such pure, unadulterated joy. He dropped to his knees beside it, completely absorbed, already staging an imaginary match. The wrestlers didn't just drop them off. They spent the rest of the day, these massive, intimidating figures, acting like the kindest neighbors Sarah could have imagined. They helped her move the few belongings she had, which didn't take long. They fixed a leaky faucet in the bathroom, tightened a loose doorknob, and even put up a small shelf in Leo's room for his new wrestling figures. Their presence wasn't just about charity. It was about genuine community, about showing up and being truly present. They played with Leo in the backyard, demonstrating wrestling moves in slow motion, making him laugh until his sides hurt. They ate sandwiches and talked, not about wrestling, but about life, about hard times, and the unexpected kindness of strangers. Sarah watched them, still in a daze, but a warmth spread through her chest that had been absent for so long. With access to proper medication and, more importantly, a stable, stress-free environment, Leo's health showed immediate signs of improvement. The persistent cough that had worried Sarah for months began to subside within days. He ate proper meals, slept soundly in his own bed, and his energy levels soared. The dark circles under his eyes faded, replaced by the bright, curious gaze of a healthy child. Sarah felt a profound relief, a physical easing of tension she hadn't realized she was carrying until it began to lift. Sarah herself began to process the overwhelming change. The constant gnawing stress and the paralyzing fear of eviction and poverty started to melt away. Nights were no longer spent staring at the ceiling, consumed by worry, but in peaceful sleep. She found herself smiling more, laughing more easily. A deep sense of gratitude washed over her, replacing the despair she had lived with for so long. She started to see a future, not just for Leo, but for herself too. A future where she could breathe, where they were safe, where dreams didn't feel like cruel jokes. News of the wrestlers' generosity spread like wildfire throughout their small town. At first it was disbelief, then awe, and finally, inspiration. People talked about it in the grocery store, at the diner, and in church. It became a story of hope and community, a powerful reminder that even in the toughest times, kindness could prevail and create miracles. It wasn't just Sarah's life that was touched. It sparked a conversation, a renewed sense of possibility, reminding everyone of the profound power of a single act of compassion. Rex, having seen his act of gratitude come to fruition, felt a deep sense of redemption. His career, fueled by this renewed purpose, truly took off. He was no longer just the Titan. He was a symbol of hope and second chances. He never forgot where he came from, or the woman who had shared her last $10 with him. That moment had reshaped his entire outlook. He found strength in it, a reason to fight not just for himself, but for something bigger. The wrestlers, true to their word, stayed in touch. They sent postcards, called occasionally, and even visited a few times when their tours brought them close. Sarah and Leo became honorary members of their extended, unconventional family. The bond forged by that single act of kindness proved to be a lasting one, a testament to the fact that true connections aren't always found in shared blood, but in shared humanity and unexpected generosity. Sarah finally felt like she belonged, not just to a house, but to a community of people who truly cared. It was a new beginning, brighter and more hopeful than she had ever dared to imagine. Life in their new home was everything Sarah had dreamed of, and more. Months passed, and the small house became a true home, filled with warmth and the echoes of Leo's laughter. Sarah found a stable job at the local community center, working as an administrative assistant. It wasn't glamorous, but it offered steady hours, good benefits, and most importantly, it allowed her to be home with Leo every evening. No more juggling 3 part-time gigs, no more frantic rush between shifts. The constant pressure that had defined her existence for so long finally lifted. She could breathe, truly breathe, for the first time in years. Leo was thriving. His health, once a constant source of worry, was robust. He had energy to spare, running around the yard, playing with friends, and excelling in school. The wrestling ring playset in his room saw daily action, filled with imagined battles and heroic victories. He still loved wrestling, perhaps even more now, but his understanding of it had deepened. It wasn't just about the flashy moves or the loud crowds. It was about the stories, about good triumphing over evil, and about the unexpected kindness that could emerge from the most unlikely places. He often talked about Rex and the other wrestlers, not just as heroes in the ring, but as real-life heroes who had changed their lives. Sarah, remembering her own struggles and the incredible generosity she had received, felt a deep need to pay it forward. She started volunteering at the local women's shelter, offering support and guidance to other single mothers who were facing similar challenges to what she had endured. She shared her story, not to boast, but to offer hope, to show them that even when things seemed impossible, there could be a way out. She helped organize food drives, gathered donations for essentials, and spent hours listening to women who just needed someone to hear them. It was a way of honoring the gift she had been given, a way of ensuring that the ripple effect of kindness continued to spread. Rex, the Titan, became a celebrated figure in the wrestling world. His story, often shared in interviews, resonated deeply with fans and fellow wrestlers alike. He used his growing platform to advocate for struggling communities, speaking out about the importance of empathy and selflessness. He never tired of telling Sarah's story, emphasizing how a single act of kindness from someone who had nothing had fundamentally changed his life. He funded scholarships for underprivileged youth, supported local food banks, and became a vocal champion for those who often felt invisible. His success wasn't just about winning titles. It was about making a real difference in the world, inspired by a woman who had given him her last $10. The ripple effect of Sarah's single act of kindness was profound. It wasn't just Sarah and Leo whose lives were transformed. Rex found redemption and purpose. The wrestling community discovered a renewed sense of shared humanity and used their collective power for good. The small town, once burdened by economic hardship, found a story of hope that uplifted its spirits. People became more willing to help their neighbors, more open to acts of generosity, inspired by the tale of the struggling mom and the kind-hearted wrestlers. It became a powerful reminder that even the smallest gesture, a seemingly insignificant act of compassion, could ignite a chain reaction of generosity, transforming not just individual lives, but entire communities. One crisp autumn evening, Sarah and Leo found themselves in a bustling arena, the air thick with anticipation and the roar of the crowd. Rex, now a world champion, was headlining the event. Leo, wearing a miniature Rex t-shirt, was practically vibrating with excitement. As Rex made his grand entrance, the crowd erupted. He scanned the faces in the audience, his eyes searching. When he met Sarah's gaze, he broke into a wide, genuine smile. He gave a subtle wink, a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey, a testament to the powerful, unbreakable bond forged by a simple act of humanity. Sarah smiled back, a tear tracing a path down her cheek, a tear not of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude, and the profound understanding that kindness truly was the greatest superpower of all. Their lives, once defined by struggle, were now a testament to the enduring legacy of compassion, a legacy that started with a mother's selfless heart and her last $10.